be a member of the Scout movement unless you hold a warrant or you have a letter of appointment, and if you're not a member you mustn't wear uniform. And I'm sitting here in Scout uniform illegally because I do not hold a letter of appointment and I hold no warrant. So it just shows you how ridiculous the situation with organisers can be. So it is very, very important. And the other point too I would like to make about this, if you're not recognised, I wonder what that was, if you're not recognised, they don't feed any information to you. And information should always be a two-way contact, and if you're not having information about the movement fed to you as an organiser, you're not in a position to take all sorts of action. And once you are recognised and you're on the list, then they start feeding you information. Sometimes you feel there's far too much of it, but at least it's better to have some than none at all. I think Len will join in with me with the next comment I'm going to make, a comment about keeping Jamboree on the air simple. We've both fought tooth and nail if anyone has suggested revising the rules to bring in a lot of pettifogging rules about starting dead on time and finishing dead on time and all sorts of rules. We feel one of the great pleasures of Jamboree on the air is that there are so few rules and people more or less do what they like and it's free and easy. And I think you agree with me, Len. We see no reason for bringing any stringent rulings. I don't know if anyone has any particular feelings about this. Allied with this, we fight tooth and nail when anybody wants to turn it into a competition of trying to work as many stations as possible. I think we're both speaking with the same voice if I say we'd rather you had 3 contacts lasting an hour with groups than 300 lasting a few seconds. I think you get far more out of it with long conversations. So we fight against that every time. I don't know if anyone's got any comments they want to make on that. But I'm throwing this in because, to explain why we do fight. The amateurs have, for those who are not particularly steeped in the radio amateur traditions, the amateurs have a number of competitions where you virtually just give your call sign and get a number back in exchange, and they work thousands and thousands of stations. They stay up for 48 hours without a break, working thousands of stations. And whilst this is great for competition, it doesn't tell you anything about the other chap at the other end, his name or anything. So we don't think this is in keeping with any of the ideas and behind Jamboree on the air at all. So we're not in favour of making it into any form of competition.
If I could butt on to this point.
Certainly.
We have from time to time, take my Australian counterpart and myself, have idly wondered, well, if someone does something particularly meritorious, like putting up a 90-foot tower or a 40-foot 3-element beam on 80 metres, or takes the operator and the station up onto the top of a mountain and operates in a cave, or something like that, they should deserve to have something more than just a simple certificate. But where does one draw the line? And certainly we should not say any meritorious thing is not making 10,000 contacts or like that completely. But if they do something outstanding getting the station going, well, we think that they should deserve some sort of award. And have you got any ideas what sort of award they could get?
Would you consider this a worldwide award or a national award?
It's immaterial. Let's assuming the idea was adopted, World Bureau dreamed up some special certificates, one edged in gold, for instance, instead of plain. And the national organisers think, well,
you can make too much preparation for Jamboree on the air, and that is one of the preparations to take the boys along. I think very few people realise, who are amateurs, that it takes people quite a long while to get used to SSB signals, and the average person can't understand a thing the first time they hear it. It takes at least 10 minutes listening, and suddenly it starts to dawn on them what's being said. And to drag little boys in, virtually to expect them to understand it in 5 minutes is an impossibility. And I think that's a very important point indeed. Thank you very much for making it.
It's one of our New Zealand troops make October its communications month. That's the theme for the whole month, and they do go along to an amateur station and find out quite a bit about it first before Jamboree on the air.
After all, you don't jump into a car having never driven it before and drive away, and I think this is the sort of analogy.
Just on that point, Prime in Ireland have 2 operators at least that were commissioned, because at this point the boys are understanding what is happening. It's very useful to have a second operator who does understand what is happening and explain it all the time.
Yes.
Exactly as it happens, because the operator is usually too busy trying to talk to the station or keep the conversation going. They can't be stopping every 2 seconds to explain to the boy what is going on. So that way you have a second operator to break out the actual operator on the microphone and explain, be worried about trying to explain to the boy what's happening.
No, that's very true. That's another way of doing it. Yes. He becomes the salesman virtually, while the other one's demonstrating how the car's driven.
Comment on that.
Yes, Ken number 2. Yes. I'm a member of the 1st Bournemouth troop, so I'm 1st Bournemouth Scouts, and I get GB3 FBS for 1st Bournemouth Scouts 1 year. Lovely call sign. Next year you hear it on again, and you think, that's that chap Les I spoke to with the 1st Bournemouth Scouts, and you find it's somebody called Walter who's at Birkenhead, because the following year the 1st Birkenhead Scouts have applied for that call sign first, and it's reissued to whoever applies for it first. And this confuses you poor chaps abroad, because every year they work these GB calls thinking that's the chap I spoke to last year, and it isn't. And this is the trap. If we've got more than one operator, and one of the operators expects to sleep during Jamboree on the air night, he can't, because he's got to sit there and look over the shoulder of the chap that's operating. I'm dead against special calls myself, for the very reason that Ken has given, that you don't recognise the people the following year. Even worse, our post office will willy-nilly issue GB calls. I mean, if it's Huddersfield County Camp, they'll issue GB3 HCC, say, but if the Huddersfield Cricket Club decide to put a station on 2 weeks later, they'll issue it again, so you'll be working the station thinking it's the Scouts, and it's a cricket club, nothing to do with the Scouts. And the poor chap who has to sort out the QSL cards, think of it, has no chance whatsoever, because the post office don't tell him the dates when these GB stations are on. He just sends them round to everybody in turn, hoping they're there, and you sort out what are yours and send them back to it. It's quite ridiculous, but we're all, the amateurs in Great Britain, are fighting like mad to get something logical done about it, but we're getting nowhere at the moment. So I feel, whilst I disagree with the idea of special calls, the situation is one we appreciate, but we can't get out of. Okay, you wanted to say something? They've both been fired.
Fortnight ago, I was again. Two of the Jamboree stations.
Yes.
But we hope that this way to spread the broad of county. We want to spread it around if we use LA4LM as a call sign from this Jamboree. Nowadays would work LA4LM, or somebody would the version. But if we have got a special prefix, somebody will listen for the broad Jamboree. Somebody will care about the county. And I know the Finnish Scouts have made a lot of e-expeditions to this market free. I think we owe the radio amateurs something. They have helped us to take part in Jamboree on the air. If it hadn't been for the normal radio amateurs, we could not have had Jamboree on the air at all. So I think we owe them something. So if we can give them a new country, if we can give them a new prefix, if we at the same time can spread the word of scouting to them, I think it's also our job to do this. And I think that's what we should do.
Just on this point, Les, and also tying in what Ken said earlier about not just plugging the publicity for the scouts, but also for the amateurs. I think that there's a lot to gain by publicising more in the radio magazine, and that's obviously to get articles in about what amateur radio is. Because it's all very well for the national organisers to, when they find out DI through XXX could operate with Jamboree, post them off little thing explaining what it is. But there are a lot of amateurs who don't know what it is at all, have got station, have got scouts, may have scouts down the road, but they don't understand what Jamboree on the air is. And if we could get into some of the big magazines, like QSC or Radio Communications, all the worldwide magazines, an article on what the Jamboree on the air is, I think we can hold great goodwill for it, and also we can bring the message of scouting that Victor is talking about to these stations. And I think we have got a lot to be grateful for amongst the amateurs, and I think they are really very enthusiastic about the Jamboree on the air. And certainly, I have never come across any amateur in Ireland who ever refused to do anything that I've asked them to do for scouts. And I think there are a lot more amateurs who don't know what they can do. If they were told what they could do, they would go out and do it. So I think that if there was some way that we could either appoint some kind of a subcommittee who might look into producing articles that would be sent to these international magazines as sort of a PR team to publicise Jamboree on the air internationally and take perhaps a little bit of the burden of the national organisers who can promote it then in their own country.
Yes, fine. In fact, somebody suggested to me, I don't know if it was somebody here, only the other day, that we ought to get an article, if possible, in something like Reader's Digest. Because it's the sort of book that sits on dentist waiting room tables for the next 10 years, and people will be reading about it for years and years, where the majority of other magazines get thrown away. And if anybody knows of a method of getting anything published by Reader's Digest, then we're in.
We've been trying to get something published by Reader's Digest on Scouting for the last 20 years.
We were talking a little while ago about the abnormally high number of stations having special call signs in Great Britain. I know we're talking mainly here about encouraging JOTA in countries. I'd like you to think sometime during the conference, and probably come and tell me afterwards, what happens when too many amateurs take part? Because this is another problem most of us are not facing, but we are begin to face it in Great Britain, where we're on a very tiny island. We get about 300 or 400 stations taking part, and when the conditions are bad like they are at the moment, and everybody congregates on one particular band, it's absolute pandemonium. And we've reached a state where we're too successful. And I just don't know what to do about it, quite frankly. Once the radio conditions improve, people will spread out more. But it is a fact that you can be too successful. If you have too many stations, then the quality of the contact starts to drop. And it's not a good thing. Anyway, gentleman over there.
It's very interesting to the things draw. The overdeveloped countries with several hundred stations working in JOTA. What can those overdeveloped countries do for the countries the JOTA is rather unknown? I think that would be very, to me, it would be a very much more interesting thing. What can we do in the future in the other parts of the world, not only in Europe? In know from earlier today that even in the United States, the JOTA activity is very low. And other parts of the world, it's fairly unknown. What can we do by that? I think we can take the problems in Europe with helping other parts of the world. And we have now a unique chance to discuss the problem for the future. And what can we do, what can we give to the other parts of the world in that way. I'm not afraid of humanitarian in, let's say, Africa.
No, here.
I just add on. My interest in radio communication with my churches is so that perhaps I can take a portable set with me on a canoe trip so that I can communicate with my home base to assure a nervous mother that her boy has gone over the first forecast. I'm not interested in radio just because of a weekend in October. That is only a part of the whole season. I don't want special badges. Maybe the program has an assigned badge, and we are not a badge-conscious group. What goes on out here in my voice, more that they can somebody come up with me is much more important to me than seeing a bunch of pink goats and green goats and Lieutenant Governor Ward. Because I know that there's too much ego going on in the group. So that I would like to back up this gentleman. What he did to the boy, week by week in radio and JOTA is just part of a bigger scheme.
Yes, I think just to sort of draw an analogy, we all indulge in scouting for 4 years, and then we come along to a jamboree and recharge our batteries. And JOTA should recharge our yearly batteries for a entire year's radio program. And this is the analogy, I think. Anyone?
And perhaps also provide the initial charge.
Yes. Yes.
The initial introduction. I think this is where JOTA is important. Introducing the point to radio communication generally. If I may point out, and I can't speak for the African countries and the North American countries, but Canada and the United States hold science fairs every year. And I've judged many of them. And invariably, starting at about the age of 10, these children have little transistor sets of one kind or another. I feel now I'm going to go home as a result of this conference, make my presence felt. Well, I need to go to those science fairs in uniform, handing out children information to the kids in school who are likely Cubs Scouts anyway, who are unaware of because of that talking refrigerator syndrome that
Operation Overkill. Yes, sir.
I want to say something how to make jamboree on the air allowed among the radio amateurs. Because in Finland 10 years ago, jamboree on the air was rather unknown among the radio amateurs. And in Finland we have used a special fleet in the ocean India for the water station. And the use is to make the jamboree on the air allowed among the radio amateurs in Finland. They also made expeditions to the amateur countries to Åland Island, the Finland Ocean, Japan, Chile, in order to make boating and radio projects known among the radio amateurs. And now I believe that almost every radio amateur in Finland knows what radio project is, and they have broadcast more using the special species because when we use it, the station ordinary station easily can want to work this station. So this station could not work so many radio hybrids as JOTA station. So therefore we are now using this ordinary species for the and then organization does the goal is the gamble yet, but there was a good meaning of release special quota because we heard George W. or X-ray one Japan and the other or X-ray also we know that it's a gamble station of course.
Yes, that is the reverse side of special call signs, that the people at the other end do know you're a jamboree station, which yes. 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 Now, shall we go on to... we can always come back. We've got any other business at the end, so if we want to revert back to anything, we can easily do this at the end. Shall we go on to collecting information on JOTA activities for a moment? This is one of the very big problems for the World Scout Bureau, is getting information back to write reports. And if you get no information back, you can't write a report. And I think it's very important we consider some method of feeding back our information both to national headquarters and to the World Scout Bureau. And this is the stuff that all the publicity is based on for JOTA, so it's got to be interesting stuff. Anybody got any ideas of how to feed it back, apart from the present methods we use?
Perhaps we should ask ourselves first why we want information. You said to produce a report. Is everybody agreed that we need a report?
Yes, I'm quite agreed. It's excellent publicity for the event. The only trouble is the report doesn't get a big enough coverage. Could you run off 10,000 times more copies?
Well, I would like to say that I don't know what the other people, but I'm in the educating business and I am drowning in faith. And so, if I can see in World Studies once a year a one-page report, that's about all the time I have to do. Because the rest of the time, I'm with my boys, other Catholic or doing something, you see. I don't have time to listen to and read about all the interesting things that happen on the table. I assume they're not really interesting, but I do. Why should we?
I'm so short of reading time, I read mine in the bath.
I didn't think you bathed yet.
No, I believe myself there is a case for a report, not perhaps for us here, for the converted, shall we say, but as Jim quite rightly said, for publicity to the unconverted, which includes national headquarters in many instances. And we hope we send copies to all national headquarters. If only one of them is read by an uninitiated General Secretary or something, who thinks for the first time it's a good idea, then the whole report is worthwhile.
I think that's a well-defined aspect of memory of years.
I'd like to add just something to that you cut out all the reading matter about what happens in other countries from the World Scout Bureau report, and you cut out all the photographs, I'd still find the remnants very useful. The list, you get an up-to-date list of national organisers, list of scout frequencies, a list of coming events. And it's one of the only publications we have at the moment that tells you this, and I write to no end of other national organisers. At least it keeps me up to date with the latest addresses. And that's one reason I'd like to see it continued, if for nothing else.
Having agreed that, let's go back to the original question. How do we collect information?
Yes. Chris?
Well, first of all, I will say that we need a report, giving a national report and also world report. I'm also in the business, but I still say that we need it. But still, to get this information, they must get them from the boys themselves, because they first of all can tell you what they would like to happen next year. And the best way to do that is to give the boys the open report. Look at this. In the yearly plan, here it says something about us. That was wrote this last year. What will we do this with? This must be an activity during the year, and especially during the JOTA for those that have some kind of talking hearing station that can't hear and so forth. Give them a report, but also don't let the boys participate in that way that they get the Coca-Cola and then spit them out again because they want interesting. They get something and then you are allowed to ask them for something. If you give a boy a stick free, that is a good thing. But if you put a price to it, and that price must be write a report, then the boy will do it and he'll think, oh, that's this, I did something for it, and that it is a good thing, because a thing is valued from what it costs, not what it is, very often. So let it pay for the JOTA in writing a report, in preparing, and you will enjoy JOTA.
I think that's a very good point. I would far rather read what the boys think about the station, and probably a few drawings and cartoons, than have to write what I have to write myself to send to Len. I don't know how Len would feel about this.
Very happy indeed.
Yeah.
In fact, we have had Roy report. Maybe it might be an appropriate occasion. We have neglected shortwave listeners up to now. We must.
Yeah.
They are important. And I would like to repeat here a story which I wrote in one of the earlier reports. A little story which impressed me greatly. It came from a small troop in India, an isolated part of India. They had never met other scouts, not even Indian scouts, but they heard about JOTA from somewhere, and they got hold of a receiving set for the weekend. And he said that they were able to listen to a QSO, I think between a Malaysian station and an Australian station, it doesn't matter. And during this QSO, they invested a new scout. And this brought home to the whole troop that scouting really did exist in other countries. This I think, was a very impressive story. I've never ceased to remember it and to tell it. And the other stories, too, come from isolated islands, which have the same difficulties. They don't know other scouts. They never leave the island. And yet they report that this is one of their major activities of the year, even if they only work one other station. It is worth it for them. And I think we must not forget that aspect. We must not forget that there are shortwave listeners around, and they are playing a great role in JOTA as well as those of us with licenses.
Yes, a very, very good point indeed. I might add to that I receive a regular correspondence from the Ascension and the Falkland Isles. Nothing to do with me really, because I'm supposed to be only the UK organiser, but they write such nice letters that I have to keep writing back, and I get a constant supply of them. And they're very, very interested. The more remote the area is, the more interested they are in JOTA. It's obvious why. and it's great stuff. It still doesn't get us really get the physical information from the boys to us, but it's a thing worth working on, I think. This is probably the thing to get them to do when you are having difficulty making contact. Say, well, you write a report while I carry on working the equipment. Or start making notes to make a report. Anybody else got any ideas on how we can collect this information? As we were saying this morning, we don't want great technical diatribes on all the equipment and the names of the reference numbers of all the transistors using the sets and things like this. What we want are what actually happens from a social and international point of view. And it's not easy to get this information at times. Yeah.
Well, I think it's just like trying to organise Jamboree on the air from a cold start. You've just got to hammer at them continuously. We want flesh on the bones of your report. Before Jamboree on the air, we send out report forms, which we want to know their name, troop, contact address, the station that will be operating, space on the back of the station's work. And there's a paragraph on it, take note please, and please supply a stamped addressed envelope big enough to take a card X inches by Y inches for your participation certificate. I fell in badly last year because the cards were 1/4 of an inch, say 5 millimetres bigger, and they wouldn't fit in the envelope. But we've just got to keep on hammering at them on your reports. We want anecdotes, items of information about what's happened at your station.
Thanks very much, Joe. Station list firstly. Come up to a jigsaw puzzle. Of the developing nation. The problem is this: they have what they call the International Telegraph Union, Telecommunications Union, and they decide what they want to do with communications in the world, and each country is allowed to send a delegate. So every time you get a country becoming independent, they get a vote. So one new independent country gets as big a vote as the delegate from the USA get. The USA don't get 2 or 3 votes, they're only allowed 1. Great Britain, yes. Great Britain's allowed 1, Canada's allowed 1, they all get 1 vote. Now, when these countries develop, the first thing they appear to want to do is to tell all the rest of the world how wonderful their country is, so they stick up wireless marks everywhere and start broadcasting, and they want space. So when these delegates get around the table, there's always trouble about frequency allocations. They want more and more space for their broadcasting stations. So they look very covetously at the amateur bands. And unfortunately, I think a lot of them listen when we're mainly at work, and so we're not out transmitting. And they tune through this lovely space on places like 80 metres during the day and think, well, look at all that lot wasted. There's only 2 or 3 very elderly amateurs who are retired chatting there. We could put broadcast stations in. Now, it is laughable, but this is what happens. And every time these gentlemen meet round the table, a little bit is snipped off an amateur band, and they're getting smaller and smaller. If you saw my license that was issued just after the war, and I have a look at it occasionally. It astonishes me the size of the bands we had. They're getting smaller and smaller. So we've got to do something about it. And Jim here is saying we ought to throw our lot in behind the amateurs of the world, saying that the scouts are supporting you chaps. Don't squeeze the bands. Stop them getting squeezed. Now, what was I going to say about this? I'm forgetting myself now. I'm getting so enthusiastic about it. The point here is that the countries that do the squeezing are the new countries who normally have no radio amateurs. And because they've got no radio amateurs, they obviously couldn't care less if they all get together and vote to chop our bands to pieces, because it's no skin off their nose. They're not going to go out tomorrow and get a great big amateur radio organisation breathing down their neck saying, why did you vote for this? Because there's no amateurs. So one thing we've got to do is to help the radio amateurs by throwing our lot in with them and their various unions and clubs and organisations that try to maintain the size of the bands. Secondly, and we've already said that this evening, we've got to get more amateurs in underdeveloped countries and in these new independent countries. We've got to get them there. How do we get them? That's another problem. We've got to start working on this. Most of them, unfortunately, you hear the odd American and the odd Briton who's been posted there to help for some reason with their telecommunication. He puts on the odd station for a year or two, but he doesn't really talk about the country concerned. He talks about where he's come from Pittsburgh, or where he's come from Bolton or somewhere in England, because he's chatting back home. He's not really interested in presenting scouting in that country to us. So we don't have a good station there. We want to hear from the boys themselves, the men themselves that live in that country. That's problem number 2 I'm facing you with. Problem number 3, one of the main criticisms about our amateur radio is that they look in that tent up there and say, by golly, I can't go on a hike up a mountain with that lot. You need a couple of lorries to move it, which is a very good point. It's not. You can't go hiking all over the country or to small camps with a tremendous setup like that. And the last point I was going to make is we need a competition. We're always being harassed, and Lennon is harassed as well, people who want to turn JOTA into competition. I think most of us as scouts would like to see some form of scout competition introduced that would not favour any one particular rich amateur, that we'd all start virtually off from scratch, and you can't, the chap who can afford a great big 2 kilowatt linear to put under his aerial wouldn't win. And I've got a solution to the lot of all these problems. It's not an easy solution to them all, but I'm hoping if you think about it, I think it's a solution that might help. Now, our gallant Norwegian team here have developed some very portable radios, but they're only using them for fox hunting at the moment. Why don't we get them to develop the fox hunting receiver a little bit more to turn it into a lightweight receiver? Our gentleman here from Iceland has done all this already, so you can go to sleep because you're the expert. They've also developed a lovely little transmitter that sends dashes that you can never find out where it is. That it'll fit almost in your pocket, because you can't even see it when you're standing about a yard away, so it must be small. Let's get them to develop these into a transmitter and receiver. And let's start our radio competition using these as a QRP effort. Let's have 2 classes. One class for people who use their own receivers and the NORJAM transmitter, and the other class with more points for those that use the entire battery operated station. Let's start a competition along those lines and see how we get on. Let's get the Norwegians or somebody else, we've got the expert sitting along here, I don't see why we shouldn't give them a job to while away his dark nights up in Iceland, to develop a really simple kit that with a real idiot's instruction book that even I can build with this, that we can then ask Len if he knows, and this is going to be the most difficult problem of all, of any developing country where they've got scouts who will be willing to build the set, and we will probably provide it free of charge by British, or not British troops, groups in Europe sponsoring the scheme by raising money, because you're not going to need an awful lot, I don't think. I mean, after all, if you went round the district and asked everybody to put a few bits of money into a hat, you'd get enough to buy one of these kits. And maintain contact by letter with the groups abroad somewhere to install these stations and get them on the air for the first time. Now, we're introducing amateur radio into some of these countries. Now, they're going to say, how are they going to study for their license? Well, this is another problem, but some of them have got an easy solution. You just write up to your authorities and say, may I have a call sign, and you get one back. You don't need a license. So they're going to learn by doing it. This solves this problem. It also starts to introduce amateurs into the country, and in about another 5 or 6 years they're going to start forming the new independent country, whatever the name is, Radio Union, Amateur Radio Union, and they're going to start kicking their government to death when they start trying to cut their frequency allocations down. Well, they're going to have a go, and which is going to help us all. Now, I'm throwing this idea at you. It's a competition, it's a challenge, and I think, put the right way, next time a technical gentleman from an island across the other side of the world who build all the transceivers we use these days offer Len any money, and he said, I don't want the money, I'd rather have it in printed circuit boards, I think we'd stand a very good chance of getting them. I think we ought to send Jim out there with his sponsorship thing. He'd probably get them built completely.
I'll go. It's sponsor me to go to that country.
It answers our gentleman's problem over here. He's got a kit he can give his boys to build, and they can tell Mum they're having a wonderful time, even if the porridge is burnt. So I'm throwing this at you. Do discuss it. If you think I'm talking a load of rubbish, please say so. I'm quite willing to sit down. I'm going to sit down. Somebody's put their hand up over there. They're going to tell me the coffee's ready, I hope. All I can say is, please hurry up and get married and you'll get back on the air again. Thank you very much. Jim?
Yes, I'd like to throw one or two ideas on the scene. And those who read QST will see that they are vitally concerned at the possibility of the